This is Conversation Balloons, a podcast of interviews with experts and friends about all things generational. I'm your host, Leah Farish. This episode is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation, and we'll give you a little ears alert. We may use a little terminology here that little kids aren't used to, but we're talking today about labor and delivery. And if you've ever wanted to be in on a candid conversation with a real expert about the birthing process, you are in luck today. We have Jen Hamilton with us, and welcome, Jen.
Thank you so much for having me.
Jen is a board-certified labor and delivery nurse based in North Carolina, also a social media creator and author of Birth Vibes, and it's been a big hit. And you may have seen Jen on CNN and in the New York Times and Huffington Post, and we're just honored to talk with you today.
Well, I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
You know, you said at one point, the labor and delivery room is a magical dimension where shame, embarrassment, and disgust don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. And tell us what kind of experiences and basis you have in saying that.
Well, I think that there's so many people who worry themselves during the end of pregnancy about some of the things that may happen to their bodies that they have no control over, whether that is that their pubic hair is grown out and they go into labor early and they're worried about, having too much hair, or whether or not they are able to take a shower before labor starts, or farts or queefs or whatever might happen in labor. I see people getting so apologetic about these things that happen in labor. And if they only understood or only knew how little we care about those types of things. And I always tell people, like, if I wasn't okay with farting, if I wasn't okay with pooping, if I wasn't okay with smells that are different, I wouldn't be doing this. So I want to kind of take away some of that shame and disgust that sometimes people have within their own body and allow the labor space to be a place that they feel comfortable being vulnerable.
I love that. That is so sweet. And you've also worked in ERs quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so you really have seen everything, not just in terms of pregnancy and women giving birth, but you've had a broad experience. And one thing that captured my attention, made me want to have you on, was the simple and helpful distinction you make between a birth plan
Mm-hmm.
and a birth vibe
Yeah.
that a mom can identify. And in talking to you, I thought, okay, I won't have an interview plan. I'll just have an interview vibes.
There you go. I love it. I love it.
But tell us what you mean by that difference.
Yeah, so I think that especially in recent years, there's been this push for people to, during their pregnancy, come up with the plan that they want their birth to go by. So when we think of a birth plan, we think of interventions that we are okay with or not okay with, or ways that we want to birth, or things that we will accept or not accept. And sometimes we can prepare our entire pregnancy for a birth that ends up going completely off script. And there's a lot of shame and disappointment and guilt sometimes that can happen, not because the birth went bad, but because the birth went different. And sometimes when our expectations are not met due to circumstances beyond our control, it can begin the process of maybe having some postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, because we're kind of trying to process a birth that went different. So I see it play out all the time where, you've got somebody who has prepared their entire pregnancy for maybe an unmedicated birth. That was their whole dream, that they wanted to go into labor and through the birth without an epidural. And I've had it happen before where someone goes into labor at 6 o'clock in the morning after being up all night with another child who's been throwing up, and they're beginning this labor process exhausted, where they don't have the same reserve that they thought they would when the plan was coming into place. And so there's this feeling of failure, like didn't do it how I said I was going to, so I've now failed this experiment of birth because I did it different. Where, I want people to see interventions not so much as like inherently good or evil, but just as tools to use in your toolbox if you need them. And if you don't, that's great. But when I'm thinking about helping people through a birth experience, I rely more on helping them plan their birth vibes. So, this is kind of like building your own cocoon of safety around you so that even if the task, the physical things of birth might go different, that you have built this cocoon so that no matter what happens, you still feel heard, respected, empowered. So these are things like, how do you need to be communicated with? Like, what kind of information do you need to make sure that you feel like you're making an informed and empowered decision? Who are you bringing with you, and what do you want that person to do for you? And are they the right person? Because I think that sometimes labors and births are hijacked by support people who may not have your best interest at heart, whether it's the father of your child who you think should be there and he is more interested in his Xbox or, gambling on the internet. I've seen all kinds of stuff. So, are you bringing the right people with you? Are we empowering them throughout the pregnancy where they're learning about how they can support you during labor? What kinds of things might come up that might change a plan that you had in place? And are you giving yourself grace to do that? And kind of debriefing in your birth along the way, along the twists and turns, making sure that you understand what's happening, and why things may happen the way that they do. And also what kind of environment you need. The hospital can feel like a very sterile place. And one thing about labor is that it's hard for your body to surrender to labor if you don't feel like you're in a comfortable, safe environment. So,
Mm,
just like animals, I mean, animals go find a spot off in the woods sometimes to give birth because they need their own private space to feel safe. And
mhm,
there are ways that within the hospital walls that we can help that happen, to make the hospital environment feel less sterile, feel less cold, so that you have kind of built your own little cocoon of safety around you within those hospital walls.
mm, mhm. Well, and um, certainly, my husband's a doctor and is at the hospital today, and
Yeah.
certainly it can help the patient feel more positively toward the hospital when they have realistic expectations and they've had clear communication and they don't look back with blame or disappointment on what was provided.
Yes.
Um, and I I think I was interested with some of the things you said that um, are good to include in a birth plan that you've said elsewhere. And one word that you want to stop and work with the mom about is the word natural. Why
Yes.
is that kind of a sticking point potentially?
So the word natural birth means different things to different people. So sometimes somebody says, I want a natural birth, and they just mean a vaginal birth. Sometimes natural means spontaneous, that they go into labor on their own. Sometimes natural means for people that they don't want an epidural. So anytime I meet someone as my patient and I ask them about their goals of labor and birth, and they tell me that they want to have a natural birth, we pause and we say, tell me more about that. Tell me more about how I can advocate for you to accomplish or experience this birth in the way that feels most natural to you. Does natural mean that you're able to move around? So I think that there's this word natural that people assume is like better, right? That natural is better.
Mm.
Sometimes natural is not great. There are natural things that occur that are not awesome, and there are natural things that occur that are better. So I think that dialing down what someone could mean by that helps me as their nurse to be able to advocate for the things that are within their values, so that throughout the labor process, if things ebb and flow and change, that I know what's most important to them so that I can help them get to that point.
Hmm. When I was giving birth to our second child, I was in a hospital, and my father-in-law was the anesthesiologist
Oh my goodness.
on duty, and he came in and said,
Wow.
"We're so excited. We're gonna have
Yeah.
another grandbaby, and, um, by the way, if you want an epidural, I'm not giving it to you."
Oh no.
And I don't know if there's anyone else in here today that can do that, so
Oh
just
no.
don't figure on that. I'm going,
Yikes.
"Okay."
Did you get it? Did you end up getting an epidural or no?
No, it went real quick and real smooth, and
Oh,
I
good.
didn't need anything but to have that baby.
Good. Excellent.
So, yeah, it was quite a dilemma for me to think.
Yeah. Oh
And
no.
I was the same way. Oh, natural,
Yeah.
that sounded like a wonderful thing, and, "Oh, you don't want your baby to be born sleepy," and all
Yeah.
that, and, but it turned out that, I needn't have worried. Um,
You had it.
I really think it's been a good thing for you to talk about making, all the decisions you can before labor starts while you're calm and while you're, not under, experiencing pain or new sensations that can, throw you off. And um, you said, once you do um, articulate and we agree ahead of time on what it is that you want, I'm not going to ask you once you're in labor if
Right.
you need something. I'm not going to ask you even if you're in pain.
Mhm.
We've decided on our course and we're going to go with that. To me, labor, especially the first time, was such uncharted territory. I was thinking I was making plans and had options and knew what I wanted. I had no idea.
Right. Yeah.
I It was for me, labor was cognitively disorienting.
Oh, very
Tremendous. It
true.
was like these waves, not really of pain, but more of just like lifting off of
Yeah,
consciousness,
that's a good way
and
of
then I
putting
come
it.
back down and I'd
Yeah.
see, my surroundings and then woo, off we go
Yeah.
again, and I was in another world. And, I I couldn't I really couldn't have foreseen what it was I needed or wanted and really couldn't articulate it very well. At one point, a nurse asked me, "Would you like some Demerol?" And I said, "How does that
Right.
make you feel?"
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh, like you've had a couple of beers." And
Mhm.
I said, "How does that feel?"
Right. Can you tell me
I've
that?
never had it. I'm not interested in alcohol.
Yeah.
So that I thought, okay, I'm really not in a position to decide at this point. I felt like I needed to delegate it to somebody else.
Yeah.
I mean, I know your emphasis is the locus of control is in mom,
Mhm.
but frankly,
It's hard to do that. Yeah. Yeah. I
I
think it's
was not in
I think
control.
it's important for me to give people information to make decisions before they get into a position where their brain is not where they're cognitively disoriented, because
Yeah.
pain does that to you. It takes you outside of your body, to where you can't process information. So I like to use those calm moments in the beginning to talk about options, so that
Mhm.
if they so let's give an example. So if I have a patient who says, I do not want an epidural. That is my biggest goal is I do not want an epidural. Amazing. I will help you. I will be your cheerleader if you don't want an epidural, and I will be your fairy drug mother if you decide otherwise. So, what I do in those calm moments is I try to explain all of the options that we have for pain control with their risks and benefits, so that if later on down the line you say, Jen, I need something, you know what those risks and benefits are. So I'm not trying to explain to you, oh, okay, well, you can get IV pain medicine. And actually, that might make your baby a little bit sleepy, but your baby's looking okay right now. Like, there's a lot of information that I need to give to you in order for you to have informed consent. But I feel much better about that informed consent if we've already talked about it, so that if you need to reach for that in a moment later, you know what you're asking for. Um, I do have patients sometimes who say, I don't want an epidural. I don't want you to tell me about it. I don't want it to even be an option. And so I will respect whatever they ask. But then if their plan changes and they do want an epidural, I feel like there's no way that I can actually give them true informed consent when they're like, yeah, 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 whatever, whatever, whatever. Like, I'll take it.
Yeah.
I don't care. So I like to use those moments to talk about it just in case, stuff
Hmm.
happens. Stuff happens. It doesn't mean that you failed. It doesn't mean that you are going against everything that you ever wanted. It just means that, sometimes things change. So I do like to have that calm moment where we talk about stuff. And then if you never need it, that's awesome. The other thing I tell people is, if that is your goal, like if your ultimate value within this birth is not to have any pain medicine, I don't offer it. It's there. You can
Hmm.
ask me for it at any moment, but I feel like there's something, uh what's the word? I don't want to coerce people into taking something just because, they look like they're in pain, So I don't
Hmm.
come in and say, "Are you hurting? Are you hurting?" Or, "Are you in pain?" Because duh, like, of course they're hurting, of course they're in pain. So I ask the question, "Are you coping?" And that question kind of helps guide me as my care whenever I'm caring for somebody who told me already, I do not want pain medicine. There are ways that I can help you cope better. If you're
Hmm.
telling me I'm at the end of my cope rope, I'm gonna help you tie a knot and hang on, and I'll give you maybe a couple other things that we can try. Because I do
Hmm.
say that labor is like a baton race of coping strategies. You want to ride one as long as you can till the wheels fall off before you reach for the next one.
Hmm.
What I see a lot of people doing when they've prepared their whole pregnancy for maybe an unmedicated birth is that they learn all these wonderful coping strategies, and they blow their load early, basically. They just
Ah.
kind of use all of their coping strategies in a very quick succession, so that they don't uh, work effectively anymore. So I tell people, if one of your coping strategies is water, save that till the end. Don't get in the water when you're feeling all right, because by the time you need the water, you're just going to be hurting and wet. So just use that, just have that in your mind, is like, okay, that's coming later, but can I get through another contraction without it? Can I try something else? Um, because I want people to be successful, and I try to give them those tips of like, hey, save that till the end.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
Smart. Um, One thing you talk about is try to encourage the moms to get a saline lock available. Can you tell what that is and why you like to see that done?
Yeah. So every intervention in labor is an informed and empowered choice. What I see some people say whenever they come to the hospital is like, I don't want an IV because A, they don't like needles, or B, they feel like that's the first step to surrender in maybe getting IV pain medicine or an epidural or something like that. The saline lock is getting an IV, but you're not leaving the needle in there. It's just a little flexible tube, and it's just taped to your arm. It's not hooked up to anything. But
Mhm.
if there happened to be an emergency, I could help you quickly. There are many emergencies within obstetrics that cause the body to shunt its blood to the core, right? So when you are losing blood, when your heart is beating really fast, you're not getting as much circulation to your arms and your legs. Your body is very smart and it takes that blood and it brings it to your brain, your baby, your heart, your lungs, all the really important stuff, which means that if there is an emergency, even if you have excellent veins on a Tuesday afternoon, those veins might be sayonara whenever we are in a situation. And you
Hmm.
can go from somebody who is very easy to get an IV on to someone who we can't get an IV on after
Hmm.
many sticks because of the shunting of blood. So I encourage everyone to make their own informed and empowered choice about that, but also
Hmm.
thinking about the possibilities that could be there in a very rare situation so that if it does happen, we've got kind of like an insurance policy. I will never force or coerce anyone to accepting a saline lock if they do not want one. But I do like to offer that as kind of like a different perspective.
You're very diplomatic. That's
Oh,
good.
thanks.
Let me give you some rapid fire things that I
Sure.
have seen in different of your posts. You don't favor aromatherapy.
I do. What do you mean?
I mean, in the room.
Oh, I'm absolutely down for anything that they want to do as far as that's concerned.
Oh, I thought you were talking about how, um, like, even the hospital staff isn't allowed to wear perfumes and things like that, and there may be gases flowing or oxygen or
I don't
flames.
remember talking about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I love aromatherapy.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Glad we cleared that
that's
up.
right.
We are grateful that Conversation Balloons is part of the Herzog Foundation podcast network. If you're new here, the Herzog Foundation is dedicated to strengthening Christian education across the country, helping parents, teachers, grandparents, and school leaders pass on faith, wisdom, and stability from one generation to the next. They support Christian schools of all kinds with free top-tier training events, help launch schools through programs like Schoolbox, and keep families informed through a growing media network, including this podcast and The Lion, their daily news publication covering stories at the intersection of faith, family, and education. We are honored that Conversation Balloons sits alongside so many thoughtful voices in the Herzog Foundation podcast network. To learn more about the Foundation's mission and the tools they offer to Christian families and schools, visit herzogfoundation.com.
What about if a mom says, "I want low light"?
Oh, I love low light. So at my hospital, we have lights that are on a dimmer switch, which is nice. Of course, there's the bright lights that we can turn on when we need to really see something. But there are ways that you can, even if your hospital doesn't have like a dimmer switch for the lights to kind of bring things down low. Sometimes people bring in like those little battery powered tea lights, like the little candles, and they
Mhm.
can put those around the room. Sometimes people bring in their own like Christmas lights so that you can turn all the main lights off but still have some soft glow. Most every hospital room has some sort of vagina light, like the kind that like the spotlight.
Yeah.
And you can even use those and turn them like to the corner of the room, like so you
Mhm.
kind of just have this like soft glow of the vagina light.
Okay. Um, is there a limit to how many people you recommend be present?
Oh, that's such a good question. So it'll differ by hospital policy because sometimes, so security on labor and delivery is very tight. They run a very tight ship. And so typically the hospital will allow like I've seen even sometimes 5 people. 5 is a lot.
Yeah.
So I think that it's less about how many people and more about who is going to be there for you and
Mm.
not for themselves, for just the excitement or drama of being there. I see so many people who try to just be nice and include people that maybe they shouldn't. And so I sometimes give my patients code words or passwords that they can give to me if they're feeling overwhelmed and they need me to kind of help the situation. So I can give them a password if they're feeling overwhelmed and they want me to clear the room, or if
Mhm.
there's somebody that we're worried about being weird and they're acting weird and they need me to get that particular person, we can kind of talk about that ahead of time.
Mhm.
But I also love to give people an opportunity to ask for my help in engaging support people to be more helpful. So in the book, I have a story about a mother who's just so excited to be there with her daughter in labor, and her energy is overwhelming the room, and so that mom just needs to feel needed and needs help feeling needed. So in the story, I kind of come up with a password or a code word that my patient can ask for when she needs my help in engaging her mom in helpful ways to kind of uh, put that energy
Mm.
to making the room feel more calm, more productive.
Mhm. That's nice.
Yeah.
You said that sometimes you take on the role of photographer if you're not
Yeah.
doing something more important.
Yes, I love doing that. I think that I mean, what an amazing moment to be there with somebody and to
Oh yeah.
have those moments documented. I think that that's
Mm.
incredible too. It's not always possible if it if there's not enough people in the room because I obviously have to tend to the medical care of the patient, but I
Mhm.
love going into deliveries and saying like, "Okay, where's your phone?" to the dad and saying, "Let me just be your photographer. You can delete whatever you don't want, but I'll try to get whatever I can."
That's nice. Yeah. Well, now you're a mom yourself,
Yeah,
and are you willing to share a little bit about how your own two birth stories
yeah.
have impacted what you do with other moms?
Absolutely. So I have what I call grown boys now. So I have a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old boy. And both of those births I experienced when I wasn't a labor and delivery nurse. So I was an ER nurse at the time. I've been a nurse for 14 years, and both of my boys were born during that era of my life. Now, because of that, I knew very little about the labor and birth process. I kind
Mm.
of just went into it saying, like, do whatever you need to do to me. I'm just here, just get me through to the end, which worked out fine both times. But now looking back on it, I wonder if I would have changed anything. My very first birth, I was kind of just over being pregnant towards the end. It's an exciting time being pregnant, sure, but by the end of it, you're like, I would like my body back, please. So
Mm.
my OB offered me an induction, an elective, excuse me, an elective induction. And at that point, I was like, hell yeah, please sign me up. So I was uh, not confused, but like surprised by how long an induction could take.
Mm.
I went into it very naive. Now my baby was born the next day, but in my mind I was like, this is going forever. But now
Mm.
being a labor and delivery nurse, I know that's actually pretty good. Sometimes you can come in for an induction and not have your baby till 3, 4 days later. So
Mm.
um I also went into my first labor thinking, I'm going to go without an epidural because my mom did. And I thought that just being related to somebody who did that was enough for me to get through it. I did zero preparation ahead of time. And by the time I hit 3 centimeters, I was like, yeah, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I didn't even make it past 3. I was like, yeah, I've had enough of this. So I was very happy with my epidural experience. I basically just took a nap, a really big fat nap, and then woke up whenever it was about time. So I had really great first pregnancy and birth. My second one threw me for a loop. I started getting high blood pressure around like the mid 30 weeks gestation, and I got insane swelling. So I looked unrecognizable. My feet got so big that my husband would like get up with me in the morning to help me put on my socks and shoes before work, because remember I was an ER nurse at the time, so I'm on my feet a lot. And he would get up with me to make sure that I could put on my compression socks. And there was one day he tried and tried and tried. He said, "I'm so sorry." Like, I can't get these on anymore. He had even taken the tongue of my shoe and like flipped it out completely. I could not get my toes in the shoe at all. So
Oh,
when I was 35 weeks pregnant, I drove to work and walked into work completely barefoot through the emergency department parking lot because I wasn't about to call out of work because I couldn't put my shoes on. Like, that just didn't seem like a good enough reason. So when I came into work and my friends saw me, my toes out, they're like, "What are you doing here? Go home." So I was like, "Absolutely not. I'm not going home because I have fat feet." So I put on those little like paper OR booties. They're supposed to go over your shoes, but I just
right.
put them over my feet because I that was all that would fit me. And so I just did a shift with my bare feet inside paper. And I was curious because my friends were like, "Do you have high blood pressure?" And I was like, "I don't know. Probably not." And enough people asked me about it that I went into a like a an empty room and checked my own blood pressure on the machine, and it was like 163 over 110, and it
Oh.
dings when that happens. And my
Mhm.
friend was walking past, was like, "This is an empty room. Why is it dinging?" Opened the door, and she was like, "Oh no, you got to go home. Like, you can't be here like this." So they took me out of work, starting at that 35-week mark because I called my doctor and they sent me to the emergency room. I was already at one, but I went to a different one, and they saw me and they figured out a high blood pressure, and they're like, "Yeah, no, you can't work anymore." Then they put me on blood pressure medicine, and around 38-ish weeks, I woke up in the morning, and what woke me up was that I could feel my heartbeat in my fingers and my face. Like, I just felt like,
Mm.
whoo, whoo, whoo. So I got up and I checked my own blood pressure, and it was 180 over 110. And I was like, "Yikes." That's not good. So,
Mm.
and in the emergency department, I'm used to people who have higher blood pressure than that. So I kind of like gaslit myself to like, maybe it's not that bad. And then whenever I went to the doctor later that day, they're like, "You're having a baby today, right? Like now." So they sent me to the hospital, and because I had had a baby before, it was a much quicker process. Like, I I got to the hospital at like 6 p.m. They broke my water and started a little bit of contraction medicine, and I had him by what was it, 2 o'clock in the morning. So it was a pretty quick process for my second one. But it was my second birth that made me want to be a labor and delivery nurse, or like at least think about it, because I had such a good experience with my nurse. Her name was
Mm.
Erica, and she took such good care of me. And I was so intrigued because she said, "Yeah, you're my only patient tonight." And as an ER nurse, I was like, "What are you talking about? Only patient?" I didn't know that. I did not know that life. So uh, yeah, it was a good experience. Which when the time came for me to leave the ER, I was like, I could try this.
Neat.
Yeah,
Propelled you into the life you have now.
yeah.
Oh, well, tell us the difference between a birth plan or a birth vibe articulated and an L&D template.
So there's a few things on my website that kind of help people to prepare. Now, when you go into the hospital, the nurse will ask you 1,000,007 questions. And if you come into the hospital in rip roar and labor, those questions might make you want to jump out of a window because you're like, I can't even handle you asking me about whether I'm going to breastfeed or bottle feed or who my baby's pediatrician is going to be. So I created a list of those questions that people can kind of pre-fill out while they're in a calm moment during their pregnancy, so that when the nurse starts asking you all these things, you say, "Here's my
Mm.
admission questionnaire," and it kind of takes care of most of those questions. Now, each hospital has slightly different questions, but I think that I covered most of them, so that if they feel like they need some help in that, then they have at least just a few less questions than they would without.
Hmm. What are some of the trends that you've seen change since you first started in L&D, and
Oh yeah,
what's hot these days?
yeah. So I think that there is kind of like this acceptance that birth goes better most of the time when we leave it alone. I think that, for so long, birth has been managed, birth has been a medical event. And sometimes it is a medical event, but there are things, it's called the cascade of interventions, where if you start intervening on things that could have resolved on their own, you can create problems just because you're intervening. Like you can kind of get into the situation where you cause the problems that you're trying to prevent. So I think that there's starting to be this shift in labor and delivery where we're starting to recognize that. At least I hope. At least I see it in my own situation where if somebody's coming in labor and they're changing their cervix, things are going fine. Why would we add contraction medicine to that? Why would we try to rush that process if it's already happening? And that's kind of where I see some of the negative effects of that happening, is if we're trying to intervene in something that's going okay for now. Interventions were made for when birth goes different. And I think that now in history, we're just doing them because they're there, because we have these tools and we should use them. When maybe that's not the right thing to do.
Hmm. Yeah, and what about other things that young moms are getting interested in doing that people my age would not have thought of?
Ooh, I wonder if you would have been interested in water birth, where maybe you're sitting in what I call sometimes birth juice. So there could be. Uh, I try to keep the water as clean as possible, but sometimes it can get a little dirty, a little not dirty. I don't want to say dirty. It can get a little marinade-y, you know, a little
Okay.
marinated in there. So
No, no,
I
it's not piquing my interest at
yeah,
all.
I know that my mom and my grandmother would have just like anytime I tell them these stories, I'd be like, "Oh God, no, absolutely not." So sometimes I see things like that, and although I think it's awesome, great, whatever, however you want to do your birth is fine with me. I don't know that very many people, who have had babies, a while ago, would do the same.
Hmm. What are the trends like with placentas and
Oh
things?
yeah, yeah. So people are beginning to like encapsulate their placentas, or sometimes just eat them. Sometimes just put them in a smoothie. Now, you didn't want to do that.
Oh,
Um, there The only evidence behind doing something like that, some people swear by it, is anecdotal, right? So there's no scientific evidence that says that consuming your placenta gives you health benefits or anything like that. Um, but again, whatever floats your boat, man. If you want to keep it, you want to. And I love it when, like just the other day, somebody had a really cool placenta. So placentas look, there's a typical look to a placenta, and usually that, like, the umbilical cord is somewhere in the middle of the placenta. Now this patient had something called a velamentous cord insertion, and that's where the if my arm is the umbilical cord, the blood vessels of the cord kind of sit up off of the placenta, like the roots of a tree.
hmm.
It can be dangerous, but we got through the birth just fine. Now, this tree root situation was kind of all the way off to the side of her placenta, where it was kind of like in the membranes. So that was cool, and I was trying to tell her how cool it was to see. So I made her a placenta print. So I just went and got some computer paper and just dab 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 dab, dab, and then you kind of see like the
Huh.
imprint of all those blood vessels and stuff.
Huh. Well, that's very thoughtful of you.
Yeah.
Well, that will go in the baby book.
There you go. Exactly.
Is there some value to trying to keep like stem cells? Do stem cells come from the cord? I've heard about preserving those for
Yeah.
future health needs.
So sometimes people do that. They can go through an outside company and they would send them like a kit, and then we would try to get blood from the umbilical cord. One thing that we've been doing that has a lot of health benefits is something called delayed cord clamping, where we kind of let the blood that's in the cord come back for the baby. Like, just don't clamp it right away. We can't do both of those things together typically. So if you're draining the cord of all of its blood because you're giving it to the baby, there's no cord blood left to store. And if you're storing all of the umbilical cord, there's no blood left to go to the baby. So I in all my years of 8 years of labor and delivery nursing, I think I've had two patients store cord blood. And I
Okay.
don't know if that ever helped them in their life at any moment, but I know that it can be a very expensive product or process without too terribly much of a chance of it, being very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an expense that you have to commit to
Years.
for life to
Yeah,
store that. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, just give one final word of advice and then we'll tell people where to get in touch with you.
Oh, awesome. So I think that my final word of advice would just be to, just like we said, uh, I want you to plan exactly how your birth is going to go, but in the way that stays constant. In remembering what your true values are, what's really important to you, and giving yourself grace to adapt to new situations if they come up.
So needed. Not just in labor and delivery, right?
Yeah, in every area of your life, for sure.
Yeah. Well, all right. And tell where people can get in touch with you
Yeah,
and find more of your work.
yeah. So on every social media platform, pretty much, if you look up Jen Hamilton, Jen Hamilton, you'll find me. And then I do have a book called Birth Vibes, and you can pre-order it right now. It does come out May 5th, and you can get that anywhere you get your books.
Oh, that will be wonderful. And many women are going to benefit, and dads and grandparents and all kinds of people
Yeah.
to know what to expect and how to help a new mommy. So thank you so much, Jen, for
Yeah.
your work and for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Subscribe and review Conversation Balloons on your favorite podcast platform. Find me at leahfarish.com and on Instagram at LEAHFARISH. This episode is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Herzog Foundation.